So a few days ago, I did a video on what I'm sowing in January. So today I'm giving you a sneak peek of what I'm going to do in February. This is just my outline plan. I'm always tweaking things, and I recommend that you don't kind of follow a plan too slavishly. But about a month ahead, you can kind of look at your beds. You can predict how many you're going to have coming free. And since most things are ready for planting out in about a month, you can actually kind of do all your planning, detail planning, about a month ahead of planting time. So that's what I like to do. I will just start recording my screen and I'll put it up at the side of the screen so you can see what I'm looking at. And you'll find a link to this database as well in the description. It's got all the details basically of everything that I'm talking about, as well as kind of notes on all of the different varieties and things like that. So let's start off with salad onions. I'm starting with Leela and Guardsman. Guardsman is a true salad onion, which means it won't bulb up. I absolutely love Guardsman, it's my favourite. And from now on, sort of February onwards, I will only be sowing Guardsman pretty much. Just because it's such a great salad onion until summer, when I'll switch over to a summer variety, but obviously I'll talk about that later. Leela is a bulbing onion, and if you like a salad onion that bulbs, so you like it, like this sort of size, then it's a really beautiful one to grow, as is North Holland Blood Red. But I don't tend to start them in March onwards. I'll just do them in January and February, and I've got some overwintering as well. Just because I like my salad onions a bit sort of pencil width sort of size. I just find, I don't know why I like them like that, but I do. I'll start my first batch of Calabrese for the year, early February. I've got loads of Calabrese already, overwintering, but you never can be sure how the overwintering stuff will do. I mean, this year we just had that really cold weather in December, and my Calabrese right now is not looking super healthy, and it's certainly not grown as much as it would normally do, because it normally puts on a lot of growth during December. But obviously nothing's going to grow when the temperature's like -10. So anyway, this is just a bit of a contingency, and it's just nice to start it off early. It does really well early. And I tend to fill it, I tend to make gaps in things like my spinach beds and lettuce beds and things like that, and just interplant Calabrese in them. And gradually over time, I kind of finish harvesting the spinach and just leave the Calabrese to have the whole of the space to itself. Start my early celery, the stuff that will go into the polytunnel for a harvest in sort of late May time. Again, I do have celery that I'll be harvesting until late May. So starting kind of, I've got some in the polytunnel now, which we're harvesting right now. And then I've got another batch that normally is kind of ready in April time. And then we harvest that, say, in April and May. But that cold snap again, it's not looking so good for the overwintered celery. So getting it started as early as possible is quite important to me. And then of course I'm still doing radish, and I'll keep on doing radish until about May time, and then we're fed up with radish by that time. Of course, by then the radish that you're sort of starting in May, it won't be ready until June, and I really don't like radish that is harvested in summer. I find it's too spicy for me, and also just the quality goes off no end. I mean, radish I think is always best in spring. So I'm doing the lettuces that I'm going to be popping into a spare cold frame. Again, I'm not quite sure which cold frame they're going to go into. It'll depend on how the other crops do. But I like to do quite a few that are going to heart up, because I really like harvesting hearted lettuces rather than individual leaves in sort of the April-May time. That is my busiest time. I spend a lot of time on my knees in April and May, so I want to minimise the amount of time I spend bending and on my knees. And one of the ways of doing that is doing the lettuce harvesting by just harvesting full heads. And then I can stand up and kind of process them while I'm standing up. So 3 that heart up quite nicely: a Lob Joyce Green, a Maize and Navara. So they're the 3. And I will do a little bit of flashy butter oak. That just looks beautiful in the salad mixes. It doesn't heart up quite so nicely, but you know, I'm prepared to bend down a few times in spring. And also starting my main crop onions. So we've got loads of overwintered onions. We've got some that will come early in kind of the May time frame. I've got some that will come a bit later in sort of June and July. And they will last us all the way through probably until the end of winter, so the end of the year. But then we've got our storage crop. Obviously, I'm storing some of those others as well, but the true storage crop are the ones that we'll be eating in sort of late December, January, February, March, April. And for that, I like Red Baron, and I also like Zebrun shallots, but I started those back in January. So I'm going to do about 480 plants. I like to do 3 seeds to a module, so I'm doing 160 modules, which is 4 trays, which is quite a lot of onions, but then we like onions. And then I'm doing my second batch of Asian greens, Joy Choy, Red Pak Choy and Tatsoi, and those will go again in a low tunnel or a cold frame. Again, I'm not quite sure which. They're the ones we'll be eating in May, in April, late April and May. And the kind of a complement to the slightly earlier ones that will be in the polytunnel. Then I do my early cucumbers, and I'm not going to do as many cucumbers as we did last year. We were kind of a bit overwhelmed with cucumbers. We had 1,500 cucumbers harvested last year, so I'm only doing 2 in the polytunnel, and they last for ages. And I'm doing 2 plants in one container in the conservatory. And rather than doing it in the troughs, I'm doing it in a big pot. The reason I'm doing that is because we're away on a holiday a lot more this year, and just watering the troughs for somebody else to come in to water them, it's really tricky. I don't mind doing it, but it's really tricky for other people who aren't quite as tall as me. So I'm just doing it in a big pot, one of them in the conservatory, because we do like our early cucumbers, but we do like our holidays as well. And then I'm doing this kind of reserve sowing of broad beans, acridulsi, and the reason I'm doing those, as I said in the January video, is we had that really cold snap, and the broad beans really didn't like being frozen down to -10. They're looking a bit sickly at the moment. They might pull through, but if they don't pull through, this batch in February will take their place. And I might still plant them anyway, even if they do pull through, just as a successional sowing. And then I'm doing my final batch of peppers, and so most of my peppers I do in January, sort of middle of January time. I do an early batch for an early harvest in December, and my chili peppers in December. These that I'm doing in February, I do in February just to give me a bit more space, because obviously, peppers grow really big in under grow lights and in the conservatory, and I just don't have space for so many of them. So this batch, the last batch, is just going to be the lunchbox peppers, and I like doing those because they're pretty quick to mature, and they just keep on growing really well, really late on into the season. So I can be harvesting those all the way through October, basically, which is quite nice. So then I'm doing my second batch of Swift potatoes. Did the first batch back in January. As I said, back in January, we're not growing anywhere near as many potatoes because we're just not eating as many this year. I'm going to do a second batch of beetroot. In fact, 2 second batches of beetroot. One of Pablo, which is the red one. I've sort of raved about it in the January video, and it's really great. Sown this early though, it does need to be under fleece or under a low tunnel or a cold frame or a polytunnel. The only reason I'm doing a second batch, really, because I probably had enough in the first batch, is just as, for reserves, basically. I'm always doing reserves because we're self-sufficient and I just can't afford to be without beetroot because we eat it pretty much every day. But more important than that reserve tray of beetroot which I'll give away if I don't need it, by the way, is Burpee's Golden, beetroot, and these need to be sown a little bit later than the red ones. They're a little bit more susceptible to the cold. I won't do these under fleece. These will definitely go at the back of coal frames or low tunnels that'll have the lids on, ideally all the way through until sort of May time, even June time. You know, beetroot really do quite like the heat. They grow really quickly with that bit of extra heat. But you can use fleece if you haven't got a low tunnel or a coal frame. More radishes, of course. I will do just one more tray of main crop onions. I'm not quite sure where I'm going to plant it, but just in case I have any problems or anything like that, it's just nice to have a few spares. So just 120 of those. Some more Leela. I think this will be my last batch of Leela. Some more red kitten spinach and some sugar snap peas to get planted out in the back garden. I like sugar snap peas for the back garden, although I like mulch too, really, for my own consumption. We grow the sugar snaps mainly for the grandkids, so you're just like running around pulling peas off, and obviously they're in the back garden more than they are on the allotment, so that's why I grow those. Another batch of potatoes, another batch of radishes, and then I start at the end of February. I'm starting the lettuces that I'll grow outside under fleece in the back garden, and I do a very small number of bijou. Bijou is an absolutely beautiful lettuce, but it's not the best tasting. So it looks beautiful in the salad mixes, but it's a slightly bitter lettuce. Not everybody likes it. So we just like to have a few leaves in the salad mixes, just mainly for the beautiful colour. And then we go for the ones that taste the best, which is Riccia, Navara, Grenoble Red, Flashy Butteroak, and Canasta. And that is it for my plan for February. As I say, that's my outline plan. You'll notice there's no tomatoes at the moment. I won't start any tomatoes until March. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So if you want any more details of the way that I garden, then take a look at my ebook, and there's a link to that in the description down below. In particular, take a look at the reference information section, because you can look back at the 2 previous years of my gardening records. You can see everything that I sowed in each month. You can see everything that I harvested in each month, everything I planted in each month. And there's videos, gardening week videos and harvest videos to show you the actual results. I really like to show the actual results because a lot of people talk about sowing things, particularly things, they talk about sowing things early, but they then don't show you the actual results that they get from sowing those things early. I often think people sow things way too early, and there's only a handful of things that I think do really well in January and February. These are the ones I've talked about in these 2 videos. Yeah, and I don't tend to do a lot of things that a lot of other people do. So yeah, I mean, compare results is basically what I recommend, unless you just like trying things out, which I spent many years just trying things out, and now I tend to do things that succeed. So my name's Steve, this is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.